Namaskaram. We missed, unfortunately, 4 or 5 days. It is quite, I think, the first time more than 2 days of break since we started this. I couldn't avoid. One day was a checkup in a medical hospital, then one day vaccination, 2 days the effects of vaccination. In my case, it was just exhaustion, no energy to do anything. Anyway, that's all over. I'm back to normal. And hope I can avoid breaks of any time in future. So, Ramayana, that's what our topic today is. We left when Rama was sent to forest by Dasharatha at the instance of Kaikeyi. Kaikeyi reminded him of the two boons he had promised her. And Rama went, Sita and Lakshmana both followed. Incidentally, the Valmiki Ramayana, which has 6 kandas. Kandas are like volumes, and the first kanda, Balakanda, ends with Rama's marriage with Sita. So Rama's going to forest is in the, what is it called, second kanda, which is Ayodhya Kanda. Ayodhya Kanda ends when Rama goes to forest, and from then it is Kishkindha Kanda. So Kaikeyi had brought Bharata on an urgent footing to the palace and appraised him of what happened. She thought she was doing a great job in favor of Bharata, but contrary to her expectation, Bharata was very angry. Bharata was angry because she might have done it in his favor, but to Bharata it was a great punishment, a curse, because it appeared that this great sin of sending the innocent Rama to forest and the death of untimely death of Dasharatha because of the sorrow from Rama's departure. All that became because of Bharata inadvertently, and Bharata's sense of righteous conduct made him very sorry and very angry. Bharata rebuked his mother harshly for what she did, and he had no other thought of redeeming himself as much as possible by going to the forest on Rama's behalf and getting Rama back to rule the land. That was his saying. So he went taking his 3 mothers, Kausalya, Kaikeyi and Sumitra, 3 mothers with him, and also the sages like Vasishtha and ministers like Sumantra and prominent citizen. They all went. They found out the route Rama took, where he had crossed the river Ganga, and how the Nishada king Guha, in Bhagavata Ramayana, none of this is mentioned. And Guha was apprehensive of Bharata's intention, but later on, realized how sincere Bharata was. So Guha helped him to cross the river. And Bharata reached Bharadwaja's ashram, where Rama had first been, Sharabhanga's ashram, and Bharadwaja's ashramam. And how they had reached that Chitrakuta mountain. It was at Chitrakuda's mountain, Bharata found out Rama's hermitage, and Rama himself was somewhat apprehensive initially, but soon the genuinity of Bharata's sorrow with what happened, from what happened so far. But Rama refused to budge from his determination to spend the promised 14 years in forest. And instead Rama persuaded Bharata to go back and rule the land. But Bharata said he will not rule as Bharata. Because of circumstance, he will accept the responsibility as Rama's representative. So Bharata took Rama's sandals as the symbol and went back. He wouldn't go back to Ayodhya, saying that he will not live in Ayodhya. He lived exactly as in the forest, in a village on the outskirts of Ayodhya. He threw away all the royal attire, took up a hermit's garments with matted hair, bark clothes, and living in a hermitage, living on fruits and roots alone, and he decided not to touch any meat until the 14 years were over. So he lived exactly as in a forest and ruled the country because someone had to do it. Meanwhile, in the forest, Rama, as soon as Bharata returned, Rama wanted to avoid all contacts with the citizens of his kingdom. So he further went deep in the Dandaka forest, and on Bharadwaja's suggestion, he went into the shores of Godavari in the place called Panchavati. And he settled down there. Lakshmana built a hut for him, and he started living there with Lakshmana and Sita. He had gone to the hermitage of Atri, where Atri's wife Anasuya. Both Atri and Anasuya appear prominently in Mahabharatam, Srimad Bhagavatam. And Anasuya gave valuable advices to Sita, and then they went to Panchavati and settled down there. It was there in Panchavati that story developed further, because Bhagavatam hadn't covered the first, I mentioned that, the first trip of Rama into the forest taken by Vishwamitra. At that time, Vishwamitra had taken Rama and Lakshmana into the forest to protect the yajna. And when Tataka came to destroy the yajna, Rama sent an arrow, killed her, and her son Maricha tried to fight Rama, but Rama, through powerful arrows, dispatched Maricha. Maricha had to go and take refuge under the sea, dive deep down in the waters to avoid the Agnayastra of Sri Rama. And Maricha was so shocked, became so afraid of Rama that he gave up all habits of a Rakshasa and became a saint and started meditating. And that was one stage. And at the Panchavati, Ravana's sister Shurpanakha, whose husband was killed by Ravana accidentally, and then Ravana asked Shurpanakha to go all over the world and search for anyone of her fancy, and Ravana would make sure that Shurpanakha would get him as her husband. And it was then that Shurpanakha saw Rama. And Rama was so handsome, Shurpanakha fell in love. Shurpanakha came as a beautiful maiden in the guise and requested Rama to accept her as her husband. But Rama refused. Rama, just to avoid her, directed him to Lakshmana, saying, Lakshmana is leaving alone. And Shurpanakha went to Lakshmana. Lakshmana also turned her away, and she was running between the two for a long time. And she became very angry and grabbed Lakshmana by force, and she rose to heaven, holding Lakshmana firmly in her embrace. And Lakshmana had no other go but to save himself. He had his sword in his hand. With the sword, he cut Shurpanakha's nose and lips and the breasts. One cut from above downwards, and that made Shurpanakha very gave her agony from the pain. So she had to leave Lakshmana, and she ran away to Lanka to complain to Ravana. Shurpanakha went and complained to Ravana that two princes, Rama and Lakshmana, with Rama's wife, the beautiful Sita, they were the cause for her discomfiture, for her disfigurement. And she asked Ravana, look, Sita is so beautiful that she deserves to be your wife, not wife of that forest dwelling Rama. So she described Sita so beautifully that Ravana was tempted. So Ravana thought about his nephew Maricha, and found Maricha meditating in a hermitage, and persuaded Maricha to accept the mission. The response from Maricha is very important in Valmiki Ramayana. The first verse is Sulabha Purusha Rajan Satatam Priyavadina Apriyasya cha Pathyasya Vakta Shrota cha Durlabha. What he says is that Sulabha Purusha Rajan Satatam Priyavadina. You will get plenty of people who talk pleasingly. They will talk what you want to hear. But apriyasya, one who apriyasya cha pathyasya, one who talks what is good, but it may not be pleasing to hear. That is, apriyasya chat pathyasya, vakata, shroda, one who talks that way, and one who listens to that is durlabha, is rare. This is from Valmiki's Ramayana, which was in a text we had to learn in school days. I remember only this verse because it is almost like a subhashitam, quotable quote. And our time is up. I stop here. Continue next year. Namaskaram.